Welcome to Theme Weavers, your weekly wisdom for weaving yoga themes into your classes to inspire your students. We're your hosts, Heidi
and Farin.
All right, everybody. Welcome to episode 19 of Theme Weavers. Today, Farin and I are excited to interview our yoga teacher, Matt Giordano, about his back pocket theme. So in case this is the first episode you're listening to, please check out episode 2 of the Theme Weavers podcast for details and background on the structure of how and why to weave themes through your yoga classes. Okay, enough about that. Now we'd like to officially welcome Matt Giordano. So I'll share with you all his bio in a second, but I just want to share. So Farin and I, we've talked about before, the way that we met is through Matt. So I took Matt's online 300-hour yoga teacher training right when the pandemic hit and absolutely was obsessed and loved everything about it. And then Matt was gracious enough to ask me to be one of his mentors to help him with further iterations of the training, including when Farin's whole yoga studio got certified. And so Matt asked me to be his mentor, and I got to meet Farin that way. So because of Matt, you all get me and Farin together, which we all know you thoroughly enjoy. So thanks, Matt, for that. So Matt, correct me if I'm wrong about any of this or if it's outdated or if you want to add anything. But Matt is an experienced registered yoga teacher of 500 hours, but probably much more than that, and the founder of Chromatic Yoga. Matt teaches from his experience and profound knowledge of the body. He provides a technique-driven, anatomy-informed practice that is education and transformative, yet uniquely lighthearted and joyful. Matt has a unique way of providing students with the missing links they need to take their practice to the next level. So Matt began his career in Manhattan, teaching excessive amounts of classes and private yoga just to make ends meet. He struggled to find his place in the yoga scene as his teaching style never quite fit the standard vinyasa mold that all of their teachers were sharing. He found his stride by offering workshops centered around techniques and biomechanics. Little by little, festivals and studios around the US and eventually Europe and Asia began hosting him. The very thing that made it a struggle to fit in was also the key that unlocked his success as he toured the world. In 2015, Matt founded Chromatic Yoga, the global school of yoga that aims to provide the highest level of education while honoring each teacher's and student's unique, authentic qualities. Rather than trying to mold everyone's asana practice to look the same, Chromatic teachers provide students with an education on biomechanics and techniques to empower them to make the best and most appropriate decisions for their body in their practice. The same is true when it comes to the heart of yoga. The teachings offered in Chromatic are non-dogmatic, yet honor the traditions of the Yoga Sutras. Chromatic teachers, like Farin and I, are encouraged to find their authentic voice and teaching style while they develop and refine their full range of skills. Matt currently lives on what he calls a hobby farm. Maybe that's a real thing. Is that a real thing, Matt? Hobby farming?
That's definitely a real thing.
Okay. Well, you're the only hobby farmer that I know. But he lives on a hobby farm in Connecticut and offers 200 and 300-hour online chromatic trainings, as well as in-person events and hybrid courses, which is how, like I said, Farin and I both met him. So, Matt, what did I leave out? Anything?
Oh, that's a pretty good bio. Where did you find that? I would definitely like to have that.
I feel like it's on your website, but maybe not. I'll have to see where I got it. It might be what I put on my studio's website when I brought you, like, with doing our teacher training in person. Maybe I sort of like took it.
Send it my way. Send it my way, please.
I will. I'm on it. It's pretty good, right?
So, yes, a hobby farm. We'll just start there, okay, quickly. A hobby farm versus a working farm. Working farm is obviously a farm where you make money off of the farming, and a hobby farm would be just a farm that you have. We're a glorified petting zoo that doesn't make any money. Let's put it that way.
It brings you joy, though, right?
Yes.
I love
yes.
that.
How many animals do you have now?
Non-for-profit, if you will.
It's definitely not for profit. Tax exempt. How many do you have now?
Animals. We have 4 goats currently, 2 pigs, some chickens, an alpaca, and a doggy.
Tito. I feel like if you don't already follow Matt on Instagram, you should, just for the fact that sometimes the other day he posted him and his wife Rebecca were snowshoeing around the farm with like their big pigs following them. It was like the cutest thing I've ever seen.
We thought it was pretty adorable too. I was like, wow, they're actually following us right now. So cute.
So the pigs like the snow?
They do. They've been digging up the like crazy, like just making pig angels, I guess you would call them.
Pig
Big snow angels.
angels. Well, I guess it would still be snow angels. We're not like human
That's
angels,
true. Yeah,
right?
yeah. I didn't think that through until I said it. Yeah.
So I didn't say one thing about your bio. So this was like your yoga bio, but you also do another really big thing with your life, especially right now. I feel like you've been like revitalizing it a lot recently, right? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Music, I
Yeah, a little
suppose.
bit. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I've been so actually, my touring life began before yoga, which was I was a musician and I toured in a band for 8 years. And towards the end of that is when I found yoga and started to get away from that kind of lifestyle and find something that was a little bit more sustainable and healthy and enjoyable. And then, of course, over the years, I little by little would bring music into my classes. Back when I taught in Manhattan, I would bring guitar in and sing a little bit in Shavasana. But I was always quite intimidated by that. I would just do it courageously the best I could. And people would always ask for it and they liked it. I was just always a little timid. And then as my traveling, touring yoga career picked up, I never wanted to bring a guitar around. So I stopped playing music for quite a long time as I toured around the internationally and everything. And come 2020, I was home a lot more. Of course, during 2020 through 2022, I was continuously creating online courses, the 200 and 300 hour training. So I had zero time for musical interest, but my whole career shifted in that I wasn't touring as much. And so by the time I completed those courses, I wanted to give myself a little gift, and I gave myself a gift of a piano. And a piano, I learned how to play it and learned to sing and play, and that just one thing led to another. And now I gig around Connecticut quite often, at least 3-4 times a month, and I'm loving it. And I'm also bringing the guitar around to yoga classes and playing in classes and at the end and in workshops and such. So I'm enjoying it.
That was one of my favorite memories from the immersions when you would come to Fresno to teach us. Heidi, were you there that day when Matt was just
I
like
was
walking down the street playing
with
his,
you,
like,
and I believe he was barefoot.
What?
I don't think he was barefoot, but he was definitely walking
I think
in the
you're
middle of the
making that up.
road.
No, in my brain, you were definitely barefoot. Like I have you in my brain, solidified, walking around the streets, playing guitar, barefoot.
Barefoot. I think the
Did I make that
whole
part up?
yoga musician thing, you're just kind of projecting an image onto me.
Plugged you
You're just
in.
adding
Yeah,
it.
you cannot walk around the streets of Fresno barefoot. That doesn't work.
Matt was like
So
walking
good.
around the street, not that close to the studio, playing his guitar, walking by himself.
It was when we went to Ampersand to have ice cream. We were walking back from the ice cream shop,
That's
and
right.
he was going to go get coffee.
I was definitely not barefoot that far away from the studio, but okay, I was barefoot. We'll just let you have it.
Our brains like create images of things. You take combinations. Like I see you most of the time barefoot, so of course you were barefoot
Totally.
walking down the street.
It's
Now,
not unlike me to be barefoot in random scenarios, but I distinctly remember that walk, and I know that I was not barefoot.
sorry, everybody. I retract my statement. Matt had
No.
shoes on his feet. Are you still nervous, Matt, when you bring out the guitar?
In certain circumstances, yes, for sure. I no longer am nervous like unless I'm playing a new song. I'm no longer nervous when I'm like playing on stage anymore. I remember the first time I got up at an open mic night, I was terrified to sing. And after several months of just doing that every week, I really began feeling a lot more confident. And then I started again playing in classes and felt like, oh, I'm still nervous doing this because it's just a different intent, right? Music, you're always playing music to serve the people that are listening, but you're also doing it for yourself when you're on stage. There's like that performance that feeds back and gives you that artistry. But when you're sharing it as, in Shavasana or something like this, I guess what's nerve-wracking is like, you can only really make things worse. It's like where if you play in like a bar environment and you don't sound that great, whatever, no one's going to, people aren't going to have that much of a worse of a time. But in Shavasana, like you really want to amplify, if anything, don't do anything, right? And just be quiet. And that's the same thing when you choose, like if you're going to play music in a Shavasana or not play music in a Shavasana or whatever, that's like the culmination of people's experience where they're integrating everything that they learned. So there is a little bit of nerves when it comes to that, because I want to make sure I'm serving the students and I'm doing it for their benefit and not mine. It's like it's no longer, hey, I'm performing music today and come listen. Let's have a collaborative experience. It's not that, that's what a show would be, right?
For sure.
Sort of everybody's contributing, but in this environment, it's like just to enhance what's happening. And not everybody in Shavasana needs music and or needs live music. And so I think it amplifies the concerns, but then it also amplifies my insecurities at the same time. So working through those things,
It's
I'll
funny.
just keep sharing though if it's appropriate.
Yeah. And I think it's always interesting to hear when your teacher has their own insecurities too. Like I feel like sort of when you're a kid and you look at your parents, you think that they're total experts at everything that they're doing and they have everything figured out because they're already elevated to the parent status. And I think when you look at your teacher, it's a very similar way. Like you think that they've worked all their shit out already, that they've got it all together. Like they know exactly what they're doing by then because they're your teacher, right? And then you're like, oh shit, they have the same insecurities that I do and go through the same things. And like, we're all just people.
Yeah. And I think it's important for everybody to understand that, exactly that, especially as a student. I think one of the most important qualities of a student is to remember that exact thing, that your teachers are your teachers. They're not some kind of better than human kind of person. There's just simply somebody that has something to offer you that you want to learn. And that is an important, I think, teaching of studentship that is necessary in all walks. But it seems that in yoga specifically, many people, for example, if I walked into a car garage and wanted to learn mechanics, and I now have a teacher, this guy perhaps says, hey, yeah, sure, I'll educate you on this. I don't think that I would have the mistake that they are, a master of life and they've got it all down. I would simply learn mechanics from them and also probably know that they have their right way of doing things and it's not the right way of doing things, but I'm going to learn from this person as I don't have the knowledge and I'm just going to take as much as I can. But it seems like when it comes to something like yoga, which is like a full life teaching philosophy or educational system, that we don't treat it the same way we would anything else. We just think like this person's got everything all sorted out and I need to learn everything from them. And I think what that does, unfortunately, it does two things. It disempowers us on some level as a student. And then on the other level, it gives too much power to somebody that could never hold that level of, being on that type of pedestal. And that's where you get a lot of, tearing down of people as soon as they make a mistake. It's like, oh man, the teacher made a mistake. They're not who I thought they was, it's all this stuff happens in an industry like this where we have to make sure as students, and of course as teachers, that we educate our students to do this. That's our responsibility. But our students have to recognize that we're human. And I think that starts from the top down. Obviously, as a teacher, we have to be vulnerable enough and courageous enough to share our insecurities and the things that we are working on, the things that we're not perfect at or anything like this. Mm-hmm. It's a process. And that's why it's called a yoga practice and not a yoga perfect or anything like this, But it is definitely something that we need as, a lot of people here probably listening are teachers. As teachers, we're also students. And as students, if we can embody that understanding that we're simply learning certain aspects of life or of asana or the body or whatever it is from certain select people. And that doesn't mean that they're perfect on everything that they do and that we need to soak up everything from their world. But just simply recognize that we can learn the best, we can pull the best out of the people that we want to learn from and recognize they're still human.
100%.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. Let's teach our teachers. Let's get into what Theme Weavers is. So Matt, on our show, we share yoga themes that are tied to Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. We offer tips on how to deliver a Dharma talk on a theme, how to weave a thematic through-line phrase through a class to remind students of the theme, how to match a peak posture with the theme, and how to conclude a class so that students can continue to reflect on the theme off of the mat and into their life. We also share with our listeners that any of these themes might be a back pocket theme. So one you might metaphorically whip out of your back pocket. You can teach it at any class, any style, any time of the day, with any posture sequence in mind. So the question for you is, Matt, what is your back pocket theme?
That's a great question. And I love that you are both offering this incredible podcast and a nice service to teachers out there. And of course, thank you for using chromatic terminology and spreading the word about it. So for me, when I'm teaching, it will depend upon the group of people that I'm teaching, so I have different back pocket themes, right? So it just depends upon the level of studentship, let's say. So if it's a group of teachers, I would usually go with something, depending on the circumstances, but I would likely go to something like Samskaras. And the teachings of Samskaras are about the patterns or the grooves of the mind, or the general patterns that do not serve us, that are in our life. And the reason I like to go to this is just because, the way that I look at yoga practice, it's the unraveling of patterns, physical patterns, mental patterns, energetic patterns, and the deliberate choice to create new patterns. That's all it is, right? That, of course, requires that we build awareness of what is, and then it, of course, requires that we take action towards what we want. The two sides of the equation: awareness and action. Now, depending on the group, I might get into what is action, like Kriya versus karma, but now that's a whole nother, or I might focus on awareness, which is, tapping into Chit Shakti and so on. But that then gets broader and broader, and it depends on how much time I have and so on and so forth. So Samskaras, if I stick to that basic teaching, it's to become aware of the grooves or the patterns that are really not serving me. Understanding that there are patterns in my life that do serve me, such as when I go to sleep at night, right beforehand, I brush my teeth, right? I wouldn't want to abolish a pattern like that in my life. I want to keep that one. But there are certain other patterns, just sticking with our discussion today, when I put a guitar on and go to sing for a group, I suddenly get nervous. That's a samskara. That there's something telling me that you're not good enough. People don't want to listen to you, or whatever it is, right? There's a whole set of stories and past experiences that are telling me in that moment, it's not going to go well. And so you shouldn't do this, right? And the action I'm taking is to recognize that there's an insecurity there. And at the same time, this, with the intent to serve the students, this might be appropriate, might be the best thing for them. It might be exactly what is needed. So the work is to create new patterns. And that new pattern would be, in this circumstance, I play guitar. And it's simple actions like that can change samskaras. But you have to be aware that the pattern exists. And then, of course, you have to take actions. It's not enough to be aware. Aware is part of the story, right? So you can be aware that something exists there. Like, every time I see my mom, I behave a certain way. That's great that you have that awareness. But without new actions, nothing changes. And on the other end of the spectrum, it's great to take action, but if it's not rooted in any kind of awareness, then those actions will likely burn you out. You'll be trying all different things that are not in direct alignment with what you're aiming for. So action and awareness based on understanding of our samskaras, or our deep-seated patterns. Now, that would be something I would talk about, and I would explain what a samskara is, how it's formed. I would usually give the imagery of a riverbed. So a riverbed is a cutout in the earth, and that cutout is formed over time of water flowing in the same path over and over again. It digs a groove into the earth. Our behavioral mechanism in our nervous system is the same way, and our actions are the same way. Our thoughts, our emotions, everything on the mind level has essentially a riverbed to it, several branches, of course, of that riverbed, so that it says, when this happens, this will happen next. And so our behaviors will always follow suit unless we employ awareness and conscious action, the choice to behave or direct that river in a new direction. But like a river, it's not likely that even if we wanted the river to just veer off into a different path and go another way, there's so much momentum going in the direction that it always goes that it takes a tremendous amount of effort to divert that river flow in another direction. And that really is the most important and I think key element of teaching samskaras, is this idea that it's not going to just simply happen because you want to behave a certain way or you want to think a certain way or you want to feel differently, right? You have to actually employ a tremendous amount of effort over and over again for the river to have a alternate path. And if you want that alternate path to be the go-to path, then repetition is even more important. If you want your reactions to go a certain way, then it means that the river has to flow a different direction more easily than the old way. So this explains why in our like relationships or in our friendships or colleagues or whatever, that when someone says a certain thing, we'll tend to behave the certain way. It'll start with a feeling. Maybe it transcends into a thought and then into an action. And then before we know it, we're like, why did I say it? Like, why did I say that? Why did I do that? Why, if we're self-reflective, at least, I didn't want to say that. I didn't want to, that's not how I wanted to behave in that certain circumstance. Well, in that moment, the river was flowing so strong that of course you're going to behave in that certain way unless you are preemptively ready, right? And you said, I know I'm about to be triggered by this experience. And so I'm going to start digging that hole, that ditch, the other direction now. I'm going to start diverting the river before it hits that corner. With practicing yoga, a lot of times when you talk about asana practice, we're trying to create these diversions ahead of time with controlled, deliberate movements, saying, I'm not going to, my body is going to move differently than it normally does by doing this warrior two posture in a certain way or whatever. And everything can be done this way. That's what practice is about. It's about refining the way that you're doing something slowly so that when it comes time for it to just happen, that is the go-to direction. The movement is going to occur this way. It is the path of least resistance. So what we're doing with samskaras, or reversing our samskaras, is trying to create new paths of least resistance. Okay, so that would be my go-to theme. I can go on forever about this, but we would pick a specific lane and focal point for that day, and we continuously talk about diverting the river to what we want. How do we want to act? How do we want to behave? How do we want to think? How do we want to practice? But the teaching that is in that, the discussion about effort that I just mentioned, this is typically, this discussion of effort and well-placed effort, I should say, is more the teaching that I would start out with for people that either have not practiced with me or people that are newer to the practice of yoga, or if I'm, let's say, at an event and the vast majority of people there are not necessarily yoga teachers, maybe they're not ready for a discussion like that. Not everybody's ready to self-reflect on their patterns of thought and emotions and things like this and behaviors.
I mean, I've taught samskaras in my classes with my students, and I think it's pretty
tangible.
It's a good,
right?
concrete. Yeah, it's a tangible idea for them to think about.
I'm not disagreeing with the idea of sharing it. I'm just, on the question
it's
of
not your back pocket for, right. Like if you were at a festival, if you were at a yoga festival.
Yeah. So I think especially if I have less time, because how long did it take me to discuss that right now? Probably
like 6 minutes or something.
Okay. Yeah. So 6 minutes. So if I have a 6-minute introduction, great. But if I only have a couple minutes because my class is an hour and I gotta, get in something really quickly, then I might teach about tapas, which is the effort that is required in order to change patterns. So everyone kind of knows that. I think, let's say subconsciously, we know that yoga is about transformation. It's about changing patterns and shit. And that's really what people love about it and also are scared of when when they either are, coming to decide to do yoga, or they've done it and they love it, but maybe they opt out of doing it one day. It's like, I don't really want to change today.
That's scary.
Because
Change can be scary. It's hard. It takes effort.
Yeah, whether it's physical, mental, or emotional,
Yeah.
we're not always into changing, right? And that's fair enough. Sometimes we just want to like be. We don't have the energy to shift. But when it comes to the practice of yoga, and I think it's just important for us to recognize that when it comes to yoga, if we're going to call it yoga, I think it's very, based on my interpretation of the Yoga Sutras, it seems very apparent that the entire practice of yoga is for making a change. And that's partially, I don't think it would need to be, the Yoga Sutras would not have needed to be written if it wasn't about change, right? If it was just about,
staying
the same, we could all just do that without.
There's no path. You don't need a path if nothing's going to change.
Yeah, just keep sitting on the couch. You're fine. Now, that's not to be confused with, the tantric teaching of saying like you're already beautiful as you are. All that's important too, and recognizing that you don't need to change in order to be perfectly you. That's a whole different set of teachings. And I think, people get a little bit edgy when we talk about change and transformation. But the Yoga Sutras itself is like, it says, hello, like one of the highest things is this idea of tapas, which I haven't mentioned yet. It's the rigor, the intensity, the effort that is required in order for transformation to occur. I think the best thing we can do when we talk about tapas is just give the analogy. Fire is the element of transformation. If you want to create fire, just think in the old-fashioned way, you would have to rub two sticks together, or whatever method you're using. But until the heat would build, the friction would build, the intensity between those two sticks would build so much that you would get that spark or that ignition, right? So in order to really have transformation, there has to first be that rigor, that intensity, or that friction. And that's a very important understanding, I think, to normalize for anybody that is starting their practice of yoga, that it's good when you're feeling that friction. It's good when you're feeling that discomfort, when you're, and I think most yoga teachers, when they first start teaching, understand this, maybe don't have the words to articulate it, or don't have the study of the Yoga Sutras to call it tapas, but they'll talk about things like, the yoga begins when you start getting tired, or
the pose starts when you're ready to leave it. Yeah.
Yes. Right. They'll say catchphrases like this, which is a way of saying the real practice starts when you're ready to employ tapas, which is enduring the intensity, the rigor of the friction, the heat, the effort that is required. So once you start, it's one thing to get into a pose. It's another thing to put effort forth. And that is the key distinction that's going to make your practice either transformative or just maintenance. And when it's just maintenance, nothing wrong with that. I think it's great. It's just, I don't know that we should call it yoga necessarily. I think we could still call it maybe asana, postural based practice, but I don't necessarily know that it's yoga unless we're moving in the direction of what the Yoga Sutras, at least from my perspective, is teaching us that yoga is, and that is to build self-awareness. And so like, as we are building our self-awareness, we have to be reflective. And I think we also have to be employing that key element of action, kriya, in order to shift what is. And when we employ action, we are going to experience rigor, tapas.
Cool. So you basically given us like 2 Dharma talks-ish, one on Samskaras, one on tapas. So I want you to pick one and then tell us what that practice might, just one of them, tell us what that practice might look like, what might your peak posture be, and what thematic through-line phrase would you use?
You can always come back as a guest a second time, Matt, and give us your second one.
Give you 55 different themes that I love to teach.
Sure. We don't even have to do our job anymore. You could just do it for us and tell everybody all of your themes. 55 episodes with our guest, Matt Giordano.
I suppose let's go with tapas. Now, this one is typically easier to pair different postures with, because it will, any posture that's going to require, I think, the employment of effort when people don't want to do effortful things is going to apply, right? So typically people like to apply effort in certain areas of their life, things that they're used to applying effort in. I think what's really appropriate when it comes to tapas is finding a posture where people want to duck out. If you were to do something that is popular, like burpees, which is not a yoga thing, but it's a gym thing, most people will be mentally already like saying, I'm ready to do this. I'm going to get after it. And because there's other things in society that says it's good to lose weight. It's good to look a certain way. People that do burpees are going to have a certain heart rate, like this whole thing, right? So you might already be like amplified to put effort forth. But I like to find the things where people are not necessarily going to put their effort forth, because that's where the teaching of tapas is a great reminder. Hey, this is when the friction comes in. So, a simple one, maybe an obvious one would be crow pose. And crow pose, a reason I would choose that, again, the tapas theme is going to be for a wider audience in my back pocket theme discussion here. And crow pose is a good arm balance that is a wide audience posture.
It's more accessible by more people.
Yes. Versus something like Ekapada Kunyasana 2, or 1 or something like this that would require a little bit more intricacy and perhaps body awareness, let's say.
Yeah, maybe longer than an hour.
Yeah. Crow pose presents for a vast majority of people a challenge in two different ways. Those that cannot yet balance the pose are going to experience likely mental and emotional patterns, witnessing that there might be a fear there. There might be the insecurity. I'm not strong enough. I'm not adequate enough. I'm not whatever enough to be able to do this pose.
There's also is everybody else around me going to be able to do it? I'm the only one who can't.
Right. But then those that can do the pose, this is the best part, have a samskara or pattern that goes like this. It goes, I can do the pose. Oh, look, I did it. And then I come out. Okay. Almost anyone that I've seen that can do crow pose will go in for like a breath or maybe two, and then they come out of the pose like, oh, I did it. As if accomplishing the pose is the end. Nobody goes into Warrior 2, goes in for a second and says, I did it, and then comes out, right? It's not about the achievement of the shape that makes the pose profound. But for some reason, when it comes to crow pose, we think, well, if I can just simply do it, then I'm done. It doesn't make a difference where you're at. If you're on the edge of balance, or if you can balance it for 2 breaths, 3 breaths, there's a level of challenge that is going to be appropriate for a wide age group. So crow pose is a good one. There are 3 different actions I would choose from for crow pose, depending on the group. The peak action would likely be either peak engagement would be activating the flexors of the wrist, which are the muscles that stop us from falling in crow pose. So one way to do that is to grip the fingers into the ground. So there would be a whole class leading up to crow pose while activating the flexors of the wrist. So gripping the fingers into the ground. What I might do is challenge those that are not necessarily ready to balance the pose to put their feet up on blocks, 2 blocks preferably, so they're already in the shape of crow pose, getting kind of in that uncomfortable position of like, ooh, I'm a little bit higher up with my butt and my feet, and I'm starting to lean the body forward into the place that is scary, unknown, and not a part of my patterns in my nervous system. And mentally, I'm starting to freak out just a little bit, not an overwhelm, just a little bit, like I don't necessarily want to do this. And then I'd have them strongly dig their fingers into the earth so that they can feel their strength, their power, and apply that effort, the tapas, to keeping themselves safe. And that specific teaching is so important, to recognize that they have the power within them to stay safe in this scary territory. And that becomes empowering. That makes them feel like, wow, oh my gosh, I can do this, right? That feeling transcends the asana class itself. People don't care about crow pose after that. Once they've got that feeling, man, Shavasana is something else. And then they want to practice more because suddenly they feel like, oh, I'm empowered. I feel better when I do this.
I can do hard things.
Yeah, that's key. We want people to want to practice because we know the benefits of practice. Unlike the fitness industry, we don't necessarily want people to come because of discipline. We want them to come because they want to come. And then the discipline is within the practice. You know, the hope, and I think the why yoga is so popular is like people want to come to yoga. That's a great starting point. And then the discipline is within the practice while we're doing these things. Now, again, I just want to talk about the theme for the more advanced practitioner in the room. The teaching of tapas is going to be sustaining the posture, crow pose, while breathing and continuously focusing their effort on gripping the fingers into the ground, subtly leaning their body weight into their fingers and continuously activating their fingers. And I would challenge them to a greater amount of breathing and softening their eyes and things like this.
So I'm hearing like a physical phrase would be like grip your fingers into the ground for the example that you gave. But what would your thematic through line phrase? Like how would you weave the theme?
Like a concise one sentence.
That's great. I'd have to really pick a specific teaching for tapas. So like I should be clear, when I talk about tapas as a general teaching, there's many themes within that, or there's many thematic through line phrases. There are many stories within that. But what I would probably use based on what we said today, like the effort it takes to ignite the fire with two sticks, employ that same effort to gripping the fingers into the ground.
I love that. And it combines the physical and the thematic in the same phrase versus having like two separate phrases. That's really good.
And that's something, in what was really taught in Chromatic Level 3, one of the things that we did heavily was finding ways to intertwine thematic and physical through lines so that they existed as one, which to me is a really advanced way of teaching because it either requires a tremendous amount of planning or the ability to pull things out like that on the spot, which is very difficult. But I think it takes a lot more practice to be able to intertwine thematic and physical through line in a way that seems cohesive and makes sense and is not like just contrived, like just because you wanted to intertwine them.
Yeah, no, that's pretty powerful. So let's say you get them out of Shavasana and you have like 1 minute left of their time before the class is done. And you want to just like put a pretty bow around everything that you taught them, both physically, thematically. They brought the rigor, they brought the fire, they brought the heat, the flexors, like all the things. How would you wrap it up in that like one last minute of class to inspire them to keep their practice of tapas and yoga going?
I think what's really important at the end of a class, wrapping up an experience, is to validate what actions have been taken. When we start ourselves on a path, we want to recognize that there's a mountain to climb. And when we've completed that, we want to recognize what we have done. And that's the two sides of the equation. I think the go-getters are always looking at what hills next, what hills next, what hills next. And they never recognize that what they've done in the past, right?
Guilty.
And the opposite is, that mountain I climbed back in, 1676, like before that one time I climbed a mountain. So there's two sides of the equation. We want to be able to actually, every time we ascend that mountain and come back down, to say like, oh, look what I did. There needs to be that reflective quality, because if there's not the reflective quality, then one, we're continuously devaluing the life that we have lived so far. And by the same token, we would not have the quality of self-reflection that is required to make the most, what's the best word I can use, efficient changes for the actions in the future. In order to make better actions next, we have to be able to reflect upon the actions that we've already taken.
I love that. It wraps up both Samskaras and Tapas.
So what I would validate in that closing argument or statement, like it's a
you're a lawyer now too.
Thesis or I'm now a lawyer. Yes. I would validate the effort that has been placed throughout the practice, both physically in gripping the fingers into the ground, and the mental and emotional effort that has been employed in order to stay in the practice and do the things that challenge them specifically. So some people were challenged by the thought of balancing or the insecurities in their head. Other people were challenged by the patience it took to stay in a posture and focus their attention. Hey, when something is easy, it's very hard to keep your attention. When something is too difficult, it's very hard to keep your attention. Everywhere in the middle, it's pretty easy to keep your attention. So those people that are on either end of the spectrum where the crow pose is easy and crow pose is very difficult, they have the most effort required, right? If it's easy for you and you stay in it and you want to stay focused, that's going to require a tremendous amount of effort. If in an opposite end of the spectrum, those of you that couldn't, balance the pose, but stayed in it anyway, kept your feet on the blocks and were leaning forward and gripping the fingers, that required a tremendous amount of effort. Now, what's important is not the crow pose or today's circumstances, but the effort that you employed in the moments that challenged you, because that is what carries off of the yoga mat.
Love that. Tapas means transformation. Cool. So this is all awesome. All of this info is going to be condensed in a little inspo sheet that we deliver on our website to our listeners. It'll be at themeweaversyoga.com/episode 19. That link is also found in our show notes. You can use that inspo sheet to bring Matt's back pocket theme, one of the many of Tapas, alive in your own voice, in your own practice and teaching.
I love it. And then Matt, if our listeners want to find you online or Chromatic Yoga because they want to deepen their own learning and experience, where can they go? Who do they follow? Where do they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I obviously have Instagram. It's the Yogi Mat, TheYogiMatt. And then Chromatic Yoga has its own Instagram as well. That's Chromatic Yoga. And both myself and Chromatic Yoga have websites, theyogimat.com and then chromaticyoga.com.
Amazing. And then, of course, you can reach out to us, Theme Weavers Yoga, on Facebook or Instagram or email and let us know how Matt's back pocket theme lands with your students. We'll share it with him. And if you have trouble getting in touch with him, we can help you as well. We're here to support you, fellow yoga teacher, in your class preparation and delivery. So let us know how we can be of the most support. Tune in next week for another episode of Theme Weavers. Matt, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate having you here, and we hope you'll come on again.
Thank you both for having me. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. And here's our favorite part of the podcast. Ready? This is how we end every episode. Until next time.
We weave you in peace.
Love it.